We think about aliens a lot, Brent and I, partly because sound, light, and frequency lives at that intersection of Hollywood and UFOs, which means we do spend a fair amount of time asking what aliens look like, particularly when they cross over from witness reports and folklore and nightmare fuel onto movie and television screens. As creatives, we do know a fair amount about the phenomenon as people report it, and they say it's real. And we know the familiar categories. If you think about it, it's the big four. First, of course, grays, certainly, but also Nordics, mantids, and reptilians. On screen, of course, the menu gets even stranger. Then you have xenomorphs, benevolent light beings, humanoids from another dimension, aquatic intelligences, and the good old bug-eyed monsters, and whatever else a writer, a director, a studio, or a special effects budget can dream up. But the journey from the mind to the movie theater is rarely a straight line, and it's almost never easy. I'll give you a case in point. I learned that the hard way on my first produced UFO movie, which we've talked about on this podcast. It was called Official Denial, which was the original film that launched the Sci-Fi Channel. Now, the script had about as many UFO ideas as I could cram into 90 minutes without requiring an actual forklift, but it also had a captured gray in it because I was trying to be authentic. That turned out to be my biggest mistake. We had a modest budget, to put it kindly. When it came time to put that alien on screen, the surviving gray, called Doss, was played by a 15-year-old Australian dancer named Holly Brisley inside a rubbery alien suit. And let me be clear, Holly gave it everything that she could. This is not a story about her failing. This is a story about the unforgiving nature of alien creation, because if the alien doesn't work, the mythology starts to collapse. And audiences, they can believe in Majestic 12 or hidden bases, recovered craft, and even time distortion, but only if the being at the center of it all feels real. And that's why today's conversation matters, because an alien is never really just a creature effort. It's the answer to the question that the whole story is asking. So today, Brent and I have brought in a person who knows exactly how hard that work is and who's triumphed at it over and over. And Brent, let's talk about our guest and let's bring this man in and get into the art, the science, and even the terror of the whole thing, and talking about what it means to make an alien.
I'm Brent Friedman. Years ago, a family friend who became a cabinet member in the Reagan administration disclosed to me that aliens are real, they're here, and he'd seen them.
I'm Bryce Zabel. Later, when we were producing Dark Skies, an NBC TV series about an alien invasion, we were approached by men who said they were from the Office of Naval Intelligence, and they wanted to give us inside information in exchange for access to our show.
We didn't take that deal, but we have never stopped thinking about it.
That's why we do this podcast. We're working out ideas in real time about how Hollywood has portrayed aliens and why.
Every episode is different because there are so many questions.
We're looking for answers. It's an active investigation. Let's do this together.
All right. This is a very exciting episode for me because one of my favorite parts of the process of development is taking those ideas that we put on the page and talking with an actual artist who's going to bring our imagination to life. It's always a fun negotiation, if you will, trying to figure out how those words can become actual living things that fit within the budget and the schedule. But before I go any further, I want to introduce to you today our guest, who is one of the absolute rock stars of Hollywood. He's definitely one of the best special effects experts that I've ever had the privilege of knowing for 3 decades, mind you, and we even got to work a few times together. Todd Masters is the founder of MASTERSFX, which has a long list of credits ranging from Look Who's Talking to Star Trek First Contact to Tales from the Crypt, the TV series, to Stargate SG-1, and of course, Bryce, our TV series, Dark Skies.
Damn.
Unfortunately, that quick rundown is not going to do Todd justice. We'd need a full episode to go over his long list of credits. But let me just say this. Todd Masters is an innovator and an Emmy Award winner, and most importantly, a real good dude who I'm proud to call my friend.
Wow.
Hey, Todd. Don't blush.
Yeah.
I got him blushing. That's exactly what I was doing.
Let me get some foundation on it. Actually, it's not 30, it's 40, if you can believe it. Our company is just about to be 40 years old. I've actually been doing this since I was 12. So that's more like 46 years or something.
Did you say 12?
Yeah, I started when I was 12.
Hey, Todd.
I was doing amateur stuff. Sorry.
In all those years, how many monsters and aliens have you created? What's the number at?
Impossible to remember.
Is it hundreds or is it dozens or is it 1,000?
It's well into the many hundreds. Yeah. We've been going strangely since the 80s. Brent, I think we met on the Resurrected, which we were doing in the late 80s.
Yes.
We were both 5 years old, I recall.
Yes. I was 3. I think you were 5.
Yeah.
Or maybe I was 5 and you were 3.
You didn't have the beard. Yeah. But no, magically, a practical effects company still beats pretty strong. So it shocks even me. The numbers I keep seeing. Star Trek First Contact's going to be 30 in November. Yeah. Tales of the Crypt streaming right now. Those episodes are really old. So it's just wild.
And we have Dark Skies is coming up on our 30-year anniversary this year.
Yeah. What are we going to do?
So the number I want to go back to is 12. I know things are done differently in Canada, but how did you start working in special effects when you were 12 years old?
I was a really big kid. I had a really deep voice, kind of like this. And I was just fascinated by Ray Harryhausen movies and these animated cyclopses. And every Sunday, this is before we had recording mechanisms. I don't even think there was satellites beaming this in. It was probably just yarn and tin cans, but we used to watch Sunday Sci-Fi Channel. I'm sure you guys did too. I saw in the magazines Ray Harryhausen and a couple other names, and somehow I got keyed in that there's these things called phone books. And so I went to the Seattle library and I pulled out the London phone book. Hey, there's Ray Harryhausen. Not many Ray Harryhausens. And so I started calling him and a couple others like Will Vinton and Tom Barman, just because there was no internet. There wasn't even many books. And so I'm sure I called Harryhausen at like 3 a.m. I didn't understand time zones. And so that kind of started this pursuit. And I looked in the local phone book for animation and stuff. And I found these guys called Hill Brothers Cartoons down in the worst part of Seattle. Took the bus down there at 12, just talked my way into getting a gig. And we were doing an educational film about birth control. And I was this kid that my parents hadn't told me anything yet. Right. And so all of a sudden I'm painting sperm and I'm painting prophylactics and uteruses as like cartoons. And so I got a pretty good education that summer. And by the time I was 13, I became head of the department, which was pretty funny. And I just was like this kind of talker. I could talk myself into almost anything. And there was another thing going on downtown Seattle at this lab called Alpha Cine, which the Hill Brothers told me about. That's where we were having our film process. And I went down there and I talked myself into an effects job in the optical printing department. I started cleaning interpositives and shit like this. One day film comes through sideways and I go to my boss, what is this? And he's like, oh, that's Star Wars 2. I'm like, what? And it was Empire. It was Empire Strikes Back. And so I started working on Empire Strikes Back at 13 or 12 or something. I don't know. Wow. And yeah, it was a blue screen snowspeeder. And so,
hey, for the people who are listening who may not know, tell us who Ray Harryhausen was.
Mr. Harryhausen is well known in our world as kind of the godfather of horror and science fiction effects and animation. He did a lot of aliens, in fact. So back in like the 50s and the 40s, he got his start with making these little black and whites like Mighty Joe Young. And there's a great one, Earth versus the Flying Saucers, where all these saucers smash into Washington, D.C. He's probably best known for the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad effects and the Cyclops, early Technicolor. This is model animation, so it was a puppet that they had jointed, and they would shoot a frame, he'd move it, shoot a frame. went all the way up to Clash of the Titans. He's known now as kind of the guy that opened the door for George Lucas and Phil Tippett and Spielberg for this kind of upgraded fantasy. Because before him, there was really just people in bad suits.
Let me ask you this. When you just mentioned that it's been hundreds of these creatures, whether they be alien or monsters that you've been involved in creating. I'm sure many of the directors or producers or writers that you worked with are like Brent and I. We were like, hey, we need something completely original, but it's got to be super authentic. And no one's can ever have seen anything like this before, but it needs to be familiar to. So I'm sure you've had that conversation many times.
Pretty much every day, yeah.
Pretty much. So when you're creating all these different, let's call them aliens for now. Let's separate the aliens from the monsters, although they're all kind of NHI, aren't they? They're non-human intelligence of some kind. But when you're creating an alien and somebody says, give me something different, where do you start? What's the process by which you identify how to give somebody something that unique?
That's really changed over the last few years with AI. A lot of people are doing like AI concepts right now. Back in the day, more like the 90s and the early 2000s, and I still do it, we generally look at the room. We try to figure out tonality. What is the thing that we're trying to create? If it is an alien show, I might go looking for whatever the alien group is, for things that look like they're going to inspire me, inspire the director and other people. And I look for hits because I'm not a big fan of AI and everything. We still do here and there for concepts, but it's better to use your human powers, I think, to try to source out the samples. I am not a fan of starting the process with, oh, this has to be a makeup or this has to be a long-armed guy in a suit. I don't think that really helps the film. Some cases, maybe, but I find it better to just feel through the void a little bit with these helpers like the style guides and maybe some AI and lots of conversation.
Just as an example, a lot of people who are listening to this podcast have gone on the journey with me and Brent where we walk them through the Dark Skies experience. And so a lot of them have gotten either they've seen clips from Dark Skies, or if they were lucky, they bought an old copy of the DVD set or whatever. For those people who are saying, wait, there's these grays in Dark Skies. How did we make the grays? Were they puppets? Were they people? Were they CGI? How would you describe the Dark Skies aliens they're seeing?
I'm going to back that up just a little bit,
okay,
because that's all a fascinating explanation. But Bryce, if you remember, one of the things that we threw at Todd, and we were those producers, saying, we want something totally different, totally new. Our whole approach was we had read stories that there were small grays and there were larger grays. And so we were like, okay, instead of having two grays, what if we take the idea that it's the same creature that just has the capacity to stand up and expand?
Yes.
Right? Right. And so we came at Todd with that, and I'm sure you were like, wait, what? So with that in mind, take us through the process. If you can remember, going back 30 years, what was it like trying to design these Dark Skies grays that we threw at you?
Well, first of all, we love that idea just because we hadn't seen it before, and we were going into this project with this certain familiarity in the design style. Meaning that if you recall, we made early maquettes, which are little clay design sculpts.
Yes. And
we did a very traditional, if I can use my fingers there, traditional gray, just standing there. I think Jeremy Aiello sculpted this maquette. And then we did another one where it was that all stretched out, just to, again, feel in the dark. Are we close? Is this what we want? We do it in small scale. Back then we did it in small scale like that just because it's easier to fix and change. We love the idea of the stretchy stuff because we were just right there on switching into this new material called thermoplastic, which was a high temperature, a vinyl-y kind of substance. It wasn't silicone. It was this, it was actually sex toy material that one of our artists had discovered he had made a bunch of frogs for that one Tom Cruise movie out of this ship.
Magnolia.
Yeah, that all fell down. Oh, you know who that was? That was Steve Johnson that did that stuff.
Okay.
So he had kind of done some groundwork already and found this really amazingly elastic stuff. So we started sourcing it. It was sex toy material. And the makers of Fleshlight, if you want to get there. And so we started using that stuff for all the stretchy stuff. It was super stretchy. I mean, we could plasticize it and stretch it around the building. It was crazy. And it was also translucent, so we can get some nice backlighting, which monsters always love that. So we were encouraged by that, and it was almost like you fed into our plan because we wanted to kind of pursue more of that. As far as the rest of the design and all that, we were totally going off your guys' leads. I don't remember every specific, but so there was on-set practical puppets that we had a couple. One that just had a lot of animatronics in the face, usually remote control, and that was with that really weird translucent sex toy skins. And then we had another one that did the change-o, and these were like full bodies. And we had some really funky hands, and they were pretty cool. They seemed to work for the most part. This is back in the mid-late 90s where we were pretty good at animatronics at that point, but we had never pulled that kind of material, and we were doing pneumatics, all sorts of, we were crazy back then, but we got some cool stuff. There was also digital ones that kind of were also part of the equation, and we'd often have meetings to figure out where one ends and the other begins.
You're talking about practical and digital?
Yeah, so they would shoot clean plates, which is basically shooting all the actors except for the grays, and then they would digitally create a model, light it in the computer, and composite it onto that clean plate. And that worked good for walks because we couldn't really do a walk. It worked good for wide shots. Close-ups were pretty challenging back then for digital assets. So that's usually where our stuff came in. But yeah, I think I'd have to watch the show again. Practical effects, they seem to last a little longer than that era's digital effects.
Speaking of the skies, you just described the dark skies ones, which, by the way, we'll probably show these in the video version of this. Brent, I recall that we had an artist sketch out some beautiful artwork about what these grays could do, and you saw them hunched over with their legs and then expanding. And so I think we probably dropped those on Todd, and people watching this are seeing them now. But Todd, when you also did, speaking of skies, you did Falling Skies, if I'm not mistaken. Did you not?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Now, by then, that's Star 10 years later, at least, more than 10 years later. So you had a whole lot of new tools in your belt at that time. What did those tools allow you to do in Falling Skies that you weren't able to do in Dark Skies?
Falling Skies was pretty interesting for us because they had shot a pilot in Toronto, and we didn't quite have our Toronto shop up and running yet. And so they did the pilot without us. You got to remember this, Falling Skies was a Spielberg show. Yep. After the pilot, I got called by those guys. Come on down to Amblin. We want to talk to you about doing more practical stuff. Now we're going to be in Vancouver. Rarely do we hear this one, even back then. We want to do less digital and more practical. You're the guy to do this. You know how to mix things. So, music to my ears. I hadn't seen anything until I went down there to a bunch of people in the Amblin office, and they showed me the pilot, and their Skitter design sucked. It was so bad. And so I had to find this way. I didn't even have a gig yet. I had to find this way to tell them, it's fucking Steven Spielberg, right? And it was like, I think it would be better because the original design had these big buck teeth. It was hilarious. You probably want to do this and that, and maybe change those goddamn buck teeth. I guess that sort of got them excited about us because we weren't afraid to say, look, you got buck teeth at a show and it's going to kill you. And we redesigned the Skitters. And as we got more comfortable with the producers and showrunners on the show during the making of it, new characters come along. And
the mechs too, right?
The mechs, all sorts of, I have a whole array of gas station cups with all our characters on each one of them. It's pretty cute. But yeah, they started doing the mechs. I don't know if this was like following any UFOlogy or anything, but they did all this stuff. And then they brought in Doug Jones to play this character called Cochise. And there was a lot going on during there. We were doing Skitters, we're doing makeup effects, we're juggling other shows, trying to figure out what this thing's going to be. The Doug thing shows up, and they have this concept that I also, not my job, but I vetoed it, saying it was going to suck. And this was the original digital. They're planning to do it digitally. And it looked like a digital Muppet. So we pitched a hybrid way. Since it was Doug, we knew Doug would really bring it.
Who's Doug again for the audience?
Doug Jones is the preeminent suit performer actor. I would think he's probably more of an actor than he's a suit guy. It's hard to describe a talent like that as he's a sweaty suit guy. But he does a lot of suits. He works with Guillermo del Toro quite a bit. His resume is crazy long. And so we got him involved in Falling Skies to play this character called Cochise. Everybody loved Doug, and it really should have been a Doug character. So we figured out a way to digitally slave his blinks and his brows and his little face breathings and all that stuff with his voice track. It was really very innovative by our team. And we started doing several seasons of practical and digital and mixing them together. Anyway, that's kind of going way out there. One thing I want to say about Doug and the character Cochise, and I didn't realize this until you guys started doing the Spielberg stuff. The character that they designed for Night Skies, which was the pre-E.T. but Aliens Bad story, which was designed by Rick Baker, oddly, another huge makeup effects guy, like kind of genius dude. And I got to say, there is a similarity between Cochise and Night Skies character, just in the way all the forms, and I had never seen it until you guys started talking about this, and the Tobe thing kind of got my ears perked a little bit. So
during the pilot, did you get to know Tobe Hooper?
Oh yeah.
Tobe Hooper told Brent that Steven Spielberg told him that he had been read in. He knew things, is how Tobe put it.
Didn't he say something like, they told Steven to do a deal?
And he was smoking a cigar when he said that. You've worked with Spielberg. You've assessed him personally, as have Brent and I. Now Spielberg denies it, and Tobe says it happened. Where do you come down on that one?
I don't think Tobe has any reason to lie. The way I heard it from him was that he and Steven had been buddies for so long, and Steven had just brought it up casually that there was some sort of arrangement for Close Encounters, I think it was. And I don't know if it was earlier, like Night Skies or whatever. I'm following the popular knowledge of Night Skies. But yeah, I have it in my head in Toby's voice that he had mentioned it. And I don't think it was with you guys, but it could have been, because Toby was our buddy. Toby just keeps coming up lately. He's like a spirit. I've been talking to some other friends of mine from the Tales of the Crypt group that they just brought up Toby and how he's just there. He was a very powerful Texan, a good director like that, because he could really bark. And we liked that a lot with him. He was very much a non-bullshit guy. I don't remember Toby bullshitting. He was very specific. I could tell you story after story where he reamed somebody out or he took a stand on something that wasn't accurate. He was not a bullshit guy. Spielberg, I don't know as well, but I also get that same impression that he doesn't have time for bullshit, that why would you? Why would you even bring it up?
Yeah. Look, I want to go back to, you mentioned the movie that we met on, which was The Resurrected. And I think just as a testimony to how realistic your effects can look.
Back then?
Even back then. This was what,
good
89?
lighting.
89, 87?
I think we shot it in 89.
Okay.
And I think it came out in 91.
So just to tee this up a little bit, and then I'll let you tell the story. This was a H.P. Lovecraft adaptation that Dan O'Bannon directed. I've spoken about this project a couple times on the show. And Todd was in charge of the special effects. And this was being shot in Canada back in 89. And something crazy happened with the special effects.
Every day
Todd, go ahead
something
and
crazy happened.
Tell the story.
Which day do you want me to start with? There's this, well, a couple things. Congratulations. The movie is 35 years old, June 1, which is
crazy.
Phenomenal. Yeah, I think it was filmed on leather. It's so damn long ago. It definitely was on film. I could tell you all sorts of stuff about that. But one of the locations we were filming was this little creek. And it was the flashback dream sequence to Victorian ages or whatever the
1700s or something.
1716s. And so all this cast was in costumes. We had the old house. It was beautifully done. And the whole scene is this kid looking into the creek and seeing body parts floating down like a horrific nightmare. And we had made these things that were really awful. The torso and a bunch of severed arms and just all sorts of things. The floor effects guys, like, I'm going to string them up to wire. So once we throw them down the creek, we could reel them back in and we'll get a take 2 and reel them back in, take 3. Okay, that's a smart idea. So he rigged up, I think it was like a dozen fishing reels, not necessarily the rod, but the reel, on piano wire, and he did that.
I don't even know how this story ends, guys, but this sounds so bad already.
It's worse.
Yeah.
Anyway, this was Sunday when he rigged it. Sunday night, this big storm came through. We show up Monday to shoot this little creek, and it is a raging river. It is just going out of control, but show must go on. We set up cameras. We roll it. We throw body parts down the raging river, and everybody's like, great, okay, take 2. They start reeling back the things, and one by one, being like Jaws, all the body parts float away. And I'm like, it's not like we flew up to Canada with a carton or crate full of these things. We got to go after those. So I steal a boat. I jump in this little dinghy and I go after him down this raging river. And I almost got there. Then the boat flooded. Fortunately, there was some safety people there that kept me from drowning. And anyway, life goes on. A week later, we get some cops calling, of course, because some teenagers had reeled in a torso. They were at the Fraser River
fishing,
just fishing. Yeah. And they reeled in a torso. And so they heard we were shooting upstream and they found us. They had told a bunch of tabloids that we had done this. And so it was all over the Enquirer and all these things. And we didn't get busted. We got kind of severely reprimanded. Turns out my mom knew the corner. We got away with it. But yeah.
It's always who you know. It's always
isn't it true? So yeah, that was just one of many moments on that film.
Hey, Todd, tell me what you know about the UFO phenomenon. Are you a student of it because you've created aliens? Do you pay attention to it and to what's going on with the Congress and all that stuff? Or do you keep your distance from it? What's your take?
That's a great question, which I've actually been thinking about a lot after listening to your guys' shows, which, by the way, I think your show is great. I'm kind of one of these people that it really has to be in front of me to believe it. I'm not like a religious person that believes in some invisible entity or anything. I'm spiritual, but I feel things I might believe it more, but I don't. This kind of stuff, I feel like I need to be very objective because people always come to me with stuff and I'm supposed to spurt it out in a variety of flavors. Aliens, there's certainly a lot of compelling stuff, especially lately. And I saw some of that stuff in the pilot conversation. I remember those guys coming through the production office.
So you actually can vouch for these guys coming to see us at the Dark Skies office?
Remember something really weird happened. And I, of course, remember us reshooting all that ganglion stuff. And that confused me forever. But I was also, I don't know everything that's going to go on at NBC. And then listening to your guys' stories, Brent, you and I talking a few times, going through shit. I've participated in some other shadowy stuff, just being a makeup effects guy. I used to disguise Michael Jackson quite a bit, just going out in the world. And so that kind of got me involved in disguising other people that I kind of wonder about. And so
when you say disguising, go back to Michael Jackson. So Michael Jackson, famous celebrity, wants to go out in public,
right? And
you give him a complete new identity.
Yeah, actually, me and Steve Johnson, who was going to be our other guest tonight, he and I did it. We got hired. We started a little studio after the whole Predator thing and a bunch of other things that kind of shifted us in a new direction. So we started doing Smooth Criminal. One of their producers came to us and said, hey, Michael likes you guys, and he does this with other makeup effects people, because we were kind of sort of still fresh back then. He said, could you do him some stuff? And so we started engaging with Michael's personal handlers. And Michael, we stole a face cast from Rick Baker. We started doing different faces. Michael, he always wanted to be African-American. So we started doing a few different African-American faces, just different looks. At one point I went to Michael and I said, I think we could make a really good disguise if we make you white. And he looks at me and he goes, I don't know if I can get the walk down. It was the funniest damn moment, but he was a sweetheart. He was such a nice guy. I personally,
I'd like you to do the rest of our podcast in his voice.
No problem. But Michael was a gem. He was one of the best persons I've ever worked with.
Hey, listen, just to drive back this, if you're challenged constantly to create new, interesting alien creatures, if you will, one of the things that we see a lot, and it's certainly true in the Star Trek universe, most aliens, if you will, look kind of humanoid because you got to have actors that are humans to play them. And so you end up with people that have one nose and one mouth and two ears.
You usually have a piece of sushi right here.
But two eyes, two arms, two legs, right?
Gets old.
And have you ever given that some thought? Is that part of, do you think that could be common in the universe? That's not just describing human beings, but it could be a kind of an archetype. The humanoid might be just something that evolution spews up on other planets from time to time. Are there other human beings out there, for example, or humanoids rather, in your view, because that's just something that works? What's your take on that?
Those are good questions. I believe, like you just said, that evolution is the great designer. That's just my belief. I don't believe that there's a invisible spirit out there that's sketching it out, or many iterations of the God, etc. I'm not trying to offend. It's just my situation, my thoughts. I've certainly seen some weird shit, which makes me definitely wonder, between art and science, maybe there is the joining of God. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I haven't been there. I've been there a little bit. But I think it's like you said, it's the evolutionary process over millions of years, like a river. A river is not a straight line. It keeps bumping into something, turning, bumping into something, turning. So in some sense, it feels like the two-leg, two-arm design basic works pretty well. We can walk, we can run, we can jump, we can sit. We got hands to grab things. So I think in some senses that design works pretty well. It's tempting to continue to do it, not just because we can shove Doug Jones in there, but also it's just what the human is expecting. We've only evolved so far. In my years, I've actually seen invisible stuff that's actually invisible. I've seen all sorts of creatures with different leg formats, like squids and Michael Rooker and octopus, of course, jellyfish. There is a huge spectrum of design that to me feels like it's there for a reason. It's there because they've been trying it for so many millions of years. They kept hitting something, resisting, moving to something better, back and forth. Feels like we're still evolving.
In the open, I mentioned the big four, which are grays, which we've already talked about. You designed a version of the grays for us. But the other four are mantids and Nordics and reptilians. So just I bet you've designed some things like that. But if someone were to come to you right now and go, okay, here's the thing. We want the big four and they're all in a spaceship together and they're talking to each other. Would you, A, try to just create something fresh and original from your own head, or would you B, start reading up on them and what the witness accounts say about it? So how would you approach that? Would you say, since these people are describing these things as real things, my job is to get close to that? Or would you say, screw that, this is Hollywood, I'm going to make whatever works best for the movie? How would you take that on?
I'd probably call you first, both you guys, and give me some encyclopedia hits. I'm serious. Like what I mentioned before, it's like the design void, much like a writer's quest into breaking story. It's lonely. No, you kind of have to take what you know of the environs, read the room of what people are expecting, because there's always a certain level of that. And then I think also so that's research, like talking to some people like you guys would be amazing for that. But also I do a lot of looking around on the web just to see what's out there. We reference stuff we've done before. We reference what the creatives in the film want to see or what they think it's near. And then I think we kind of do a version of the second part, which is say, fuck it all, because sometimes the strangest things will fall down from the skies and you'll have a design that's fresh and unique for the story. It's tricky. It's a little, when you guys write a scene or a script or a story or something like that, trying to design the characters in dialogue and actions and stuff like that. No fat productions, right? You want every piece to play a part. And so I kind of do that in design. I want to make sure that I'm designing this stuff right now and it's throughout the script. And I don't know how much this monster is in the writer's head, but it seems like a lot because he keeps referencing his back or his gnarly hands or his ripped open skin throughout this script. Just little teases, building blocks. So I definitely want to make sure that those items are in there too.
Hey, Brent, we're going to have to ask the question of this man.
Yes.
How much Giger do I look at? Yeah, we haven't talked enough about H.R. Giger because he's always a big part of this. Maybe that's...
Listen, here's the thing, because this is something that Brent and I have spent a long time on this podcast talking about, and I'm glad to hear that you've heard a few of the episodes, so you know, because you were at Dark Skies and also because you're a podcast listener, that we were approached by someone who claimed to be from the Office of Naval Intelligence and was offering us some kind of deal to incorporate material into Dark Skies as a form of slow drip disclosure. So, question, have you ever in your career been approached by anybody who has government authority to work with the government or to help the government or be a part of anything the government is doing in terms of preparing the public for accepting the reality that we are not alone?
Every part of that until you ask that last, accepting the reality if we're not alone, is a yes.
Let's go for the yes part. Expand on that then. What can you share with us? Because I think what we're trying to understand is we have been saying there's a relationship between Hollywood and some of these issues. And anything that you can shed light on about that would be very helpful to us, as we call this an active investigation, which means when we get a guy like you on screen, we say, what do you know? So tell us what you know.
And just to preface something, our active investigation has already turned up one director who was approached by a similar deal.
Right.
And Toby? Oh, no, we're talking.
No.
Okay.
We're talking about Brett Leonard, and who did Lawnmower Man. And if you haven't heard that episode, you should check it out. But the idea is that we have enough evidence, anecdotal and even empirical now, to say that there is some sort of a relationship going all the way back into the 50s between the government and Hollywood with regards to UFOs. But we also know that extends in other areas, right? If you look at a movie like Argo, right? Look at the story behind Argo. The government and Hollywood work together. So we know that relationship exists. And I guess based on things you and I have spoken about, I find it interesting that you may have had a relationship that was tangential to what we have, or what someone was trying to make with us.
Correct. Yeah. So I was actually going to bring up Argo. So hopefully your viewers, listeners know about this story. This was during the Iranian, one of the many revolutions, but this was back, I think, in the 70s.
79, yeah.
It was 79. And so they broke into the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and broke everything, stole files, burned shit, abducted people. It was horrific. And a small pile of the American people in the embassy trucked out of the back door just by fortune right before they got caught and went to the Canadian embassy, and where they hid for, I don't know, a period of time. It was several weeks. Meanwhile, Ben Affleck, who is basically the lead character in the movie, I would recommend reading the book. The book kind of gets into it better, but the movie's good too.
Yeah.
He plays this lead investigator who is in one of these kind of shadowy groups. He goes to Hollywood and sees this gentleman by the name of John Chambers. John Chambers is the Oscar winner for Planet of the Apes, the original 1968 movie. And he was the early leader in prosthetic effects. He had also done a lot of disguise work. He was a military guy. I think he was Navy or was he Marines? I'll look it up. But he was a military guy, and he had actually been, this is well known, he was contracted to make the CIA's first disguise kit. He had rubber prosthetics in a little box. I'll see if I can find you a photo of it. But Chambers was one of a kind. In the movie, he's played by John Goodman, which is perfect because he was this big, very joyful, bouncy guy. But you could tell Chambers he's either fucking with you behind the scenes or something else is going on. There's rumors that he was involved in making some Bigfoots. Chambers legends go on forever. He's no longer with us. I knew a lot of people that knew him very well. So in Argo, they pretty much just lay it out for you. We have a secret Hollywood group who helps us. And so there's a number of these that are out there. If you ever wonder why do some movies get such a selection of military gack for their film, there's usually someone behind the scenes that's making a deal with the military. Let me read your script, make sure it doesn't make us look like assholes, and we'll figure out a way that we can help you, and we'll bring you a bunch of actual military people too, if you like. So these things do go on since World War II. If you recall, there's another great book called Five Came Back. Not the movie, because that movie sucks, but the book. And it's all about John Ford. It's all about blanking a bunch of folks that were in military units. Zanuck.
John Huston.
Yeah, the men, the real men, if you recall. They all came back from various departments, whatever you want to call them. And they got right installed into the studios, Fox, MGM, Warner.
So they went right from war into Hollywood.
Right. And if you ever
war prepared them for Hollywood. Yeah.
You think about, especially not maybe recently, but in the not so distant past, going to set was like packing to go for war. You got to have your kit. You got to have all your shit. You're going to be away from base. The food sucks. It's like camping. It's as hard, if not harder in many cases. Obviously, these guys are getting reality on them, but it is a grind sometimes to make a movie. And you'll notice that the movies are organized by call sheets, production reports, all of these things that kind of came right out of war organization.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it's trippy. So there's definitely a connection. I've been in a couple movies where I've overheard some people. I'm suspicious now that I learned this. And so I have an eye on everything. And some movies are pointless. Why are we fucking making this movie? And it's usually because it's a military thing and it's probably propaganda. What's the biggest propaganda machine out there? It's cinema. It's TV.
Have you personally ever worked on, you mentioned that there were other organizations that seemed to coalesce around these kind of issues. Have you ever worked with one of them to assist the government? And if so, what were you doing? And what were the other people doing there?
I really like your guys' beards. I'm really impressed how good you look after all these years.
You're a charming guy, but here's the thing. Brent and I, we've been saying we say in our show that we're bearing witness because there's a giant mosaic of contact that's been put together over these decades since 1947. And that we don't have the entire picture ourselves, but we have a piece of the picture in that mosaic. We have that one piece. And if enough of those pieces of the jigsaw puzzle come together, suddenly you've got the full picture. So what's your piece of the jigsaw puzzle for us?
There's so much I can't talk about.
You can't talk about it. Why not? Why? If you can't talk about it, fine, but why can't you talk about it?
Meet me at Brent's house someday. We'll put away the phones. There's a whole network out there that's watching us and listening to us. It's been a few years for me, but they're still around. It's not this kind of powerless, silent group. We exist in a world that is per our ability to consume it. I'm not one that's witnessed a bunch of real aliens running around or anything like that. At least I don't think so. But I've had some odd people come to my office because we're MASTERSFX. We do weird shit. And like I said, back when I was doing more disguise stuff, there was a couple people that came through that I don't really know what it was about. And they told me that I shouldn't know about it. And that kind of, so in some ways I became, not trying to compare myself to the great John Chambers, but we did similar things. And there's some groups out there that they're not dangerous. They're actually helping not just the US, but other countries. A lot of countries do this stuff.
Those people that came around, what did they want you to do?
Disguise them.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, like I was doing this Jamie Kennedy show called the Jamie Kennedy Experiment for a while, and of course Michael. And so we started learning something about disguising that was different than movie makeup. And it's things like when we're walking down the street, we don't really study people that well, so you can kind of get away with shit so you can make them fast. And with Jamie, we learned not only do they not look at you, but we can get away with sweat was actually a good idea, making people a little shinier, making that natural feel as opposed to cameras and film stocks have changed over the years, of course, high def and everything. So we've done makeups for camera over the years that are just, they don't look real. Now we're in an environment that it's like an eyebrow's out of whack or something like that. Sometimes that actually does offend the eyeballs. So there's a bit of an odd route to figure out what disguise is and what the whole point of trying to fool someone is. So we got pretty good at that, and we're a shop that works fast. And I just recall a couple things going through. What was that? And what are we doing? And it's just our crazy business. And
you've heard our story. Okay. You were there at the time. What do you think happened to us?
When it happened, I honestly don't remember if I witnessed them going into your office or not. I do remember, I think it was two guys. I wasn't at the pool party, so I didn't get any of that. But at the production office,
you're probably still holding a grudge about that. We meant
yeah, where's my invite? I want my little
you
MIB.
Really did. Brent, I thought you were sending the invite. And
I know, my bad.
Do you think, because this is what people ask us, and you're an experienced guy, you've talked to people ask us, do you think that they were really who they said they were, people from Office of Naval Intelligence or from the intelligence agencies? Or do you think that were they on the level, or were they trying to disinform you? Or were they something else entirely? Were they just trying to goof on us? What would your take be?
Some of this is going to go to the fog of brain, but because all I remember is something happened because there was a bit of a excitement, enough of it that, everybody on set gossips, right? And so there was enough excitement for me to kind of hear and I seem to recall seeing these guys in the production office. We were in North Hollywood off Laurel Canyon, was it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Catty corner to 4 taco shops.
In a former porn warehouse, yes.
Was that it?
Yeah.
There you go. So I just remember back then just being, everything's going on. What was that? Okay, next. And then when you guys started talking about it, I think, Brent, you and I had met in person, I don't know, a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And you had started bringing this up. And it kind of rattled my brain because first I was like, was I at that party? And I don't think so.
All right. And I hate to play the reporter here, but that's in my blood. That's what I was trained at. Okay, I understand.
Why you look so
good. Well, I understand that you're keeping some distance, and I get that. And I'm not going to try to push beyond that. But I would like you to describe for us why you feel it's important to maintain that distance. In other words, you could just say, hey, Bryce, Brent, let me just tell you the way it's all gone down for me, but you're choosing not to do that. So tell me why you feel that you still need to choose not to do that. What is preventing you from what we would call full disclosure?
There's a lot of people that I worked with that I don't want to expose. Some you probably know. So that's first and foremost. I do a lot of weird shit, and my entire life doesn't sound real. I could go on and on. I think, Brent, you know some of this stuff. It just, for whatever reason, I'm this beacon of craziest stuff. And it's not like I'm crazy. It's just things happen to me. And as far as that kind of stuff, not only am I worried about exposing somebody, but nobody's going to believe it anyway. It's like, I could tell you blow by blow some shit that I don't even believe.
One of the most popular episodes we've done is something called All About the Woo, where Brent told some
I love that
crazy
episode.
Stories from his life, and things happened to us. So you just said, things just happened to me. Crazy things just happened. Okay. Give us one example give us your woo story. What has happened to you where you went, that doesn't quite fit.
Things that make me go.
Yeah. Give us an example of one of those.
I was murdered once, and it didn't seem to take.
I guess not. Here you are.
Here I am.
You better explain that one. What happened?
Well, I was poisoned once, not very well, and I died. I went to the light, and I'm not bullshitting, all this really happened. And actually, there's been a lot of NDE, near-death experience people that just over the years I've bumped into, and for whatever reason, we start talking about these moments. And it's so trippy because the classic going to the light story seems to be with many of them. My experience was I just faded out. I was at home. I had worked too much. My roommate had given me a bunch of pills. I thought they were for my gout. And she left, and a little time passes, and I started feeling really weird. And I could tell that the lights were dimming in my place. And I just picked up a sketch pad and I started writing. If anybody finds me, that's what's going on. I'm starting to feel like I want to go to sleep. And then I kept writing over and over again just to keep me going. Don't go to sleep. Don't go to sleep. Don't go to sleep. Don't go to sleep. And just forever. And eventually everything went black. And then a portal of light, whatever you want to call it, Carol Ann, it was up there. And something must have happened because I woke up in a different place. And I had fluids all over me. I guess I had ejected it out or something like that. But fucking hell of a hangover. The bathroom was on the second floor. I couldn't get to it. I couldn't move. Eventually, I found enough energy to crawl on my hands and knees up marble staircases. And so, yeah, there's a lot past that, but that was 15 years ago in March that happened. And I do have evidence now of what I think happened, which I don't think we need to get into here.
What does your near-death experience lead you to believe about the nature of reality?
That's why I thought your Woo episode was so interesting, because I thought it was fascinating. I think it was that episode, but I thought it was fascinating that you strung all the paranormal and all this stuff in many ways, like this invisible mycelium that's just pieces of us. Mm-hmm. Over the years, Brent, you and I have mind melded on stuff. There's other people that you just feel the mycelium a little bit, I think. Mm-hmm. And I always think the best way to deal with that is to not deal with it. Just don't even think about it, because how do we know? We're a bunch of stupid Homo sapiens. We were dragging our knuckles just a few weeks ago. How do we know that all these pieces of information are correct? Because there's so much being thrown at humans right now. It has to be some other feeling. So what the fuck is that? Is that God? I don't think it is. I think it's energy. I think it's us. Artists that are really good, writers that are really good. I think, Brent, you and I have hit on this a few times. Bryce, we've never had this conversation, so come on up. But it's something that I've been relearning with my own art, is For it to really be good, you need to crawl into it a bunch. You need to, Brent, your writings are always so dimensional and fucking weird. And just the ideas that you are able to generate with some of your stories are mind-boggling in different directions I would have never thought of. At least I didn't think at the time. And so that whole ability to crawl into your painting or your drawing or your writing in ways that are like beyond being interrupted by present society, that are really feeling it. That's true art. That's love, I think. And I think that kind of is our mycelium.
Interesting.
Hey, Brent, we got to take this thing home. So let's each ask him the question we've been waiting to ask. Let's end it with a question apiece. Why don't you go first?
Here's my question.
Oh, boy.
You mentioned your friend and partner at one point, somebody I also know, Steve Johnson. And back in the 90s, I believe, he was asked to come and be part of the alien autopsy show that happened, to come in and actually validate, is this real or is this not real?
Yeah, Dateline, I think it was.
Yeah. So my question is, you know him. I don't know the circumstances under which he was invited to do that, but that to me is another example of how, whether it's validating an alien for a TV show or just validating anything at all, using your expertise as a special effects person, is this something that happens regularly in the business? And not just with the government, but that you are asked not to make something that is fake, but to look at something that might be fake and say whether it's real. Ooh. Which is a whole different use of your expertise.
Yeah, no, that is the unspoken uniqueness of people that have been doing this kind of design, doing effects like this, knowing materials, knowing how to fake human skin and stuff like that. Yeah, that's definitely something that I've been approached a few times to suss out if something's believable or realistic.
And I'm interested in that as a skill in the world that we live in, where now everything that happens on the internet is immediately deemed AI or fake.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so where do you see this going? Right. Someone like yourself can probably look at something and determine, using all the skills you have, whether something is real or not real. But for everybody else that doesn't have access to Todd Masters,
yeah,
where are we? Where are we in terms of determining what's real? Because we're on the verge of potential disclosure. All these new pieces of media and things are coming out, and who knows if they're going to trot out an alien at some point. How do we discern what's real and what's not real? What's the best advice you can give us?
You're right. Today's AI is uncanny, and I even get fooled by it. And I thought I was pretty good with my 4 eyes, but it's coming so fast and so hard and so good. It's really hard to defend yourself as a human being. I think that this stuff is dangerous. It's all hyper sensationalized, that even the simplest lower thing is fake and people think it's better than the really crazy one. It's near impossible. I personally think that maybe the toothpaste might already be out, but it feels like we need to reel this back.
Here's my finale for you. One of the things Brent and I have realized over the years is that when you start to create TV series about UFOs and aliens or whatever, or just work in Hollywood talking about these things, people come up to you and they go, "Are you the guy that," and then they tell you their story. For me, I've had plumbers come up to me and tell me harrowing stories about when they were younger and things like that. And I remember when I was working with Stan Lee, Stan didn't actually believe in aliens. He loved to write about aliens, but he didn't actually believe that the flying saucers or UFOs were aliens. But he did say that his guy who ran the bullpen for him, I believe his name was Saul Brodsky, I hope I got that right, but he told in detail a story about Saul driving to Las Vegas and seeing a light in the back of the car, just like Spielberg. And then this thing goes over his car and it's right in front of him. And it's clearly a craft and it's pacing him. And so Stan told me that story. So my question for you is, you've had a lot of time on a lot of projects. You're standing around sets. You obviously have an open mind to the creature feature aspect of what's going on with the phenomenon. What has anyone in Hollywood ever told you one of their personal stories that is about the UFO UAP phenomenon? And hopefully they have, and you can tell that to us. But regardless, when you comprehend and think about this whole large project that we're involved in, however it turns out, what do you think personally is going to be the final explanation, or at least the early explanation, for the UFO UAP phenomenon? What do you think we're going to learn in the days ahead?
I think this actually comes from one of your episodes, perhaps, but I seem to think that this whole alternate universe, quantum, all that stuff plays a part. Maybe that's how the mycelium is multidimensional. I used to do a show called Fringe, which was all about alternate realities, and the writers on that show had a lot of fun with all aspects of that. But around that time, there was also What the Bleep Do We Know, and other kind of alternate explainers. And that stuff's fascinating. There's a point where I got to go back to work and I can't really go down those rabbit holes. So that's kind of where I'm at with the belief of it.
Listen, Todd, you and I haven't seen each other in a few years. We did see each other at some conference or something, some hotel event, I remember, not a few years back.
Yeah.
So, but it's always great to see you again. Thank you for your quality, wonderful work on Dark Skies, helping to bring our fever dream to life. That's always been a favorite memory for me. And thanks for your vouching. Thank you for vouching for Tobe Hooper, because he's not here to vouch for himself. And to hear another person who knew him and state the same thing Brent said is not something small. It's something big because of what's going on right now. So thank you.
Yeah, Toby's a hero of mine. And he's not like I say, he's not a faker. He's not a bullshitter. I miss that guy.
All right, Todd, everything Bryce said ×2. Thank you so much. It's been really fun. And I look forward to having one of our own private conversations later.
Yeah, sounds good, guys.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Time. All right.
Okay.
Watch the skies. Bye-bye. Sound, Light, and Frequency is an iHeart podcast produced by Stellar Productions. It's executive produced by Nick Johnson. And for Stellar, Jackie Zabel. Our show's music was written by Anna Stumpf and Hamilton Lighthouser. And your hosts and executive producers are Bryce Zabel, that's me, and Brent Friedman. Watch the skies.